First, I want to thank everyone for being here. It is so nice to see faces. Tonight's presentation is going to be focused on a topic that I don't normally talk about all that much, mainly because most of us, for one reason or another, prefer to avoid this topic as much as possible. Although, as those who have studied Coptic philosophy will recognize, the topic of tonight's presentation is something that Hamid Bey talks about quite extensively, and for good reason, because the key skill involved here is one that when you master it, there are no limits to what you can accomplish, either on a physical level or a metaphysical level. So at this point, before I really get into the meat of the presentation, I want to establish a foundation so that everyone, including those who may be new to this, understands what I'm talking about, where I'm coming from, and where the topic of tonight's presentation fits into the overall picture of things. So let's start at the foundation, what it is that we're talking about, which is manifesting. And there are many different definitions of manifesting, and when you really break it all down, boil it down to the basics, manifesting is nothing more than accomplishing a goal, producing a result that more or less matches the intention that you had when you started the process. And so we can manifest on a physical level, and we can manifest on a metaphysical level. On a physical level, manifesting could be as simple as preparing a meal, or it could be going to the grocery store to stock up for the next couple of weeks, or it could be taking a course and earning a certificate that is one step towards a larger goal. Manifesting on a metaphysical level, which is what I tend to talk about more often than not, involves processes that could be called prayer, or they could be called magic. And I tend to teach a process of manifesting that I call Harmonic Prayer, in which we relax into ourselves down to an alpha or theta level of mind, and then connect to the divine essence of the universe through positive emotions like love, joy, gratitude, and so on. And within that divine space, we communicate what we would like to manifest to the divine mind by imagining the end result in rich, vivid detail, as if it's now happening in the physical space around us. And then we end the process by anchoring in this idea of what we would like to manifest with thoughts and feelings of absolute truth, reality, divine power, eternal persistence, or anything else that's appropriate to the goal that we're seeking to manifest. And so that is the foundation that we're building on tonight. We are talking about manifesting, and more specifically, manifesting using non-physical means. And the next step, at least the main question that comes up for most people, is metaphysical manifesting something that actually works? Is it something that we can count on? And if so, what is it good for? Is it only good for little things, or can we use it to manifest really big, important goals? And the best way for me to answer this question, or the best way that you can answer this question for yourself even, is to go through and look for evidence of people who have been able to manifest big, important things, and try to identify, did those things that were manifested result from the metaphysical activities that they engaged in, or were they just a coincidence? Because there are a lot of people that will say that, yeah, you can pray for something, but if it happens, it's just because it was a coincidence. And coincidence can be a rational explanation once in a while. But if you're doing the same thing and getting the same result over and over and over and over again, coincidence stops being rational and it's just an excuse. And that's kind of how I see the way a lot of people tend to poo-poo the metaphysical realm. Because when you really get down into the history of things, there have been a lot of people giving a lot of evidence that cannot be explained any other way. In fact, you see the bookshelves behind me, a lot of different books that I've studied, and what you don't see are the stack of books that I put on my desk as a reference that I plan to kind of at least mention. This little stack of books right here are the ones that I pulled out that were either written by scientists who are trained to think logically, who are trained to observe the physical space around them and to identify what's true and what's not true, and to reason things out logically to see, is there a connection between one thing and another? I'm not going to talk too much about that because we simply don't have that much time, but one of the first scientific studies that I ran into was Professor Ryan at Duke University, and his experiments in ESP and what most people call mind over matter, which is telekinesis, or in some respects, psychokinesis is another word for it. One of the big things that Professor Ryan realized in his study was that those who believed in the reality of psychic abilities tended to have better results than those who did not believe. And even though his results from a scientific standpoint were statistically significant, they were also fairly low level of results. There weren't any like superstars in the group. And when you realize that he was working mostly with college students who are more or less amateurs at this stuff, then those low levels of results tend to make sense. One of the other important books that I really want to mention, Modern Miracles, and the author Erlander Haraldsson. Erlander, however you pronounce his name. I'm not good with pronouncing names, but this book was written by a scientist who studied an Indian mystic called Sai Baba, who has a long history of materializing objects out of thin air and giving these things away as gifts to the thousands of people who come to see him on any given day, any given week. I'm not sure how many people per day, per week, but there are lines of people who come in to see Sai Baba, to be in his presence as an Indian mystic, as a divine avatar in a way. And he has been giving away things for decades. And it's not just little cheap stuff. Sometimes it's the spiritual ash that they really revere in that culture. It's believed to be a very spiritual substance. But he also gives away baked goods that when he hands them over to the person, they're hot to the touch like they just came out of the oven. And of course, there's nothing like that around him. He also gives away jewelry, precious metals, and precious stones, and it's just a constant flow of one thing after another. And the nice thing about Sai Baba was that he allowed scientists to study him in their way, and he allowed films to be recorded while he's doing his thing. In fact, you can go to YouTube and see videos that show him doing his thing. And some of these videos, they try to discredit him, and they'll say, well, if you look, you can see the thing that he's grabbing underneath the table when he reaches his hand down. And I've looked at those videos frame by frame by frame by frame, and no, you cannot see any of the objects that he's giving out before he's actually got them in his hand. And again, he gives away so many different things, and in a lot of cases, people are asking for very specific things from him, and he reaches under and just gives them exactly what they're asking for without looking. I mean, it's impossible to explain any other way except for he is materializing those objects at that time. So that's a good book to go through. this one, Michael Talbot, he's someone from Grand Rapids. I just found out about that yesterday. This book, The Holographic Universe, he documents many different studies by many different scientists that go into all different areas about showing that, yes, people do, in fact, experience miracles, and people can orchestrate and manifest these miracles by intention. And so there's, again, the whole stack of books here. I'm not going to go into it. There's tons and tons and tons of evidence throughout history that show, yes, these things do happen. These things can happen. And we can set an intention to perform a miracle. And these things do, again, I'm repeating myself. I sound like a broken record. Yes, these things do, in fact, happen. So that's the first question that tends to come up when we're talking manifestation. The next question that comes up is, how does it work? How can you make these things happen? And as Hamid Bey mentioned in the reading that Linda just did, and that also echoes what Christ says in the Bible, your faith is what powers the process of manifestation. According to your faith is it done unto you, is the quote that I tend to bring up over and over and over again from Christ. Christ also said that whatever you ask for in prayer, if you believe that you have received it, then you will receive it. He says that if you have enough faith as a mustard seed, a teeny tiny little bit of faith, and do not doubt, then whatever you ask for in prayer will be yours. The other thing that really points to faith and belief as being the major factor, again, Christ, I'm just going to do one more quote, actually two more things I want to bring up because they are so important. There are many different examples in the Bible where someone is healed, and Christ says, your faith has healed you. He didn't take credit for it. In fact, he said, I'm not doing the work, the Father within is doing the work, which we would call the divine mind of the universe. Christ said it was the person's faith who healed themselves. And the other example that really supports this is the story of when he went back to his hometown. It's written, he could not do very many miracles there because of their lack of faith. And so if Christ is prevented from performing a miracle because someone doesn't believe, then that really points out that it is the person's faith who is receiving the miracle that is powering that experience. And so, again, going back to the books of all the scientists, that is the same thing that they're looking at. I mentioned earlier, Professor Ryan at Duke University said that those who believed in psychic abilities tended to do better than those who didn't believe in psychic abilities. So it is our belief, it is our faith that makes these things work. Okay. Just need to take a short little break here. Okay. So now that we know that miracles do in fact happen, that we can manifest on a large scale, and it is our faith that makes these things happen, then the next question that we have to answer for ourselves is, how do we get enough faith to perform the manifestations that we want to perform? How do we get enough faith to bring in that financial abundance that we might want? How do we have enough faith to attract the right relationship for the person that's going to be our perfect partner for the rest of our lives? How do we have enough faith to heal our bodies if something is not working well? How do we have enough faith to protect ourselves when we have to go into a situation that would otherwise be somewhat dangerous or hazardous in some way or another? How do we increase our faith to that level? And the harmonic prayer process that I mentioned before is one way that we can increase our faith. It's one of the ways that I've been teaching for a number of years. Hamid Bey, in the reading that Linda did, mentioned affirmations. Affirmations are a great way. They're what I use to get started with. The basic idea is that you repeat a statement that represents the thing that you would like to experience in life. I am and then whatever it is that you want to become. I have whatever it is that you want to have in your life. I experience whatever it is that you want to experience. I experience joy on a daily basis. I experience love in all of my relationships. I have an abundant flow of wealth flowing into my life. I am confident in everything that I do. Whatever it is that you would like to experience, affirmations are a good way to make it happen. However, there's an aspect of affirmations that's not often talked about, and that is the topic for tonight. And that is, there are many different ways of doing affirmations. One way that a lot of people tend to do is they will repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again, trying to get 100 repetitions in a minute or some number or whatever. And they think that the more often they repeat the statement, the better it's going to work. And that's not necessarily true, because if you have the right force of mind behind that affirmation, you can say it once and it's done. And in fact, that type of thing used to be called a decree. In fact, that's another quote from the Bible: "Thou shalt decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you." You don't have to repeat a phrase over and over and over again in order to have it manifest. The idea here that I'm talking about is a force of mind, or as some people might say, a force of will. And now we're getting into a topic that most of us call willpower, which is the thing that most of us would like to avoid, because willpower is often called self-discipline. And who wants to be disciplined? And especially, who wants to do it to themselves? So a lot of people, and I know I used to be one of them, think of willpower as the embodiment of forcing yourself to endure things that you would rather not experience. And that is one way that willpower can be used. But it's not the only way that willpower can be used. Willpower can be used to just simply make a decision that you are going to enjoy yourself on a particular day, and then stick with that decision and not let anything bother you. That's one use of willpower. In fact, going back to where we started this presentation, defining what manifesting is, let's define what willpower is. When you really boil down the meaning of willpower, it comes down to one thing: being able to make a decision and follow through on it. Whatever that decision is. It can be an easy decision or it can be a hard decision. Obviously, the stronger your willpower, the easier it is to make those hard decisions and follow through with them. And so that is why most of us focus on the hard stuff as being examples of willpower. Again, Hamid Bey is a great example of what can be done when you develop willpower to a major extent. He was able to control his body to the point where he did not feel pain when needles and hooks and all sorts of things were piercing his skin. He was able to control his body so that those piercings did not bleed. In fact, one thing that I remember reading, this one was really strange. 2 different doctors taking a pulse on each wrist. One doctor reads one reading, another doctor reads a different reading. It's like one reads a pulse of 60 and the other reads a pulse of 75. It's like, we only have one heart. How can there be 2 different numbers on pulses? But yet Hamid Bey was able to control his body to the point of being able to demonstrate that level of control. So that's an example of using willpower to manifest on a physical level. When we talk about using willpower to manifest on a metaphysical level, what we're talking about is really increasing the level of focus of our mind. And then the example that I tend to use here when talking about focus, one of the examples that I use is like a 60-watt light bulb. And at the time that I started using this example, incandescent lights were the only type of light at the time. Fluorescent lights, LED lights, put out different amounts of lights for the same wattage. But for right now, I'm going to talk about incandescent bulbs. And if you take a 60-watt light bulb, it puts out a certain amount of light. And if you get real close to that light bulb, it puts out a certain amount of heat. I mean, there's nothing dangerous about a 60-watt light bulb. But that's because the light is diffused. That light has all different frequencies throughout the spectrum. That light is not focused. If we focus 60 watts of light into one beam of light, all of the same frequency, it becomes what's known as a laser. And a 60-watt laser can burn through steel. Now, if we take our mind, our thoughts, and let's say we have 60 watts of thought power, and we have thoughts that are running every which way, and we've got this idea running here, that idea running there. We're paying attention to what's going on around us. And in the middle of all that, we're trying to manifest a particular outcome. We're trying to focus on, okay, this is the thing that I want to create. I want to have this experience. And let's just say that, okay, the experience is we've got a picnic that's scheduled for next Saturday or whatever. Probably would have been better earlier in the summer for this example, but okay, let's just say we've got an outdoor event coming up next Saturday. We want good weather. We want it to be warm. We want it to be sunny. And so we might be visualizing, okay, I'm visualizing next Saturday, I'm visualizing sun, I'm visualizing a certain temperature on the thermometer, I'm visualizing a dry ground because I don't want any rain to have happened over the previous day. I'm visualizing a certain level of humidity. I'm visualizing all these details. If I'm trying to do that while my mind also has a dozen other things going on around it, the power of my mind is diffused, and there's only a small amount of that power going to the manifestation that I would like to produce. And so that result will be weak. It will not be as strong as it could be. However, if I am able to eliminate all of those other thoughts and focus all of my mind on that one visualization, on that one intention to manifest that type of weather, then that 60-degree light bulb becomes that 60-watt light bulb becomes a 60-watt laser, and the power cuts through all of the interference that stands between me and that result happening, and it's much more assured to become reality. So, I'm just now realizing I've gone way off from what I had intended for tonight, but this is good because this is exactly what tonight needed to be. So, where I would like to go next. How do we develop that ability to focus our minds that intensely? And here is where the Coptic philosophy is a big benefit, because one of the things that John is always talking about is meditation. Meditation is a process where we center ourselves, we focus our minds on one thing, and we just exercise our ability to let all of the other thoughts fade away. And the more we can let those other thoughts fade away, the clearer our mind becomes, and the more we're able to focus our mind on one thing at a time. This is something that doesn't happen right away. You can sit for 20 minutes, and if you've got a busy mind, it may quiet down a little bit, but it'll still be busy. In my own meditation practice, I found that often the first half hour was really just the warm-up for the meditation. And if I really wanted to get into those deep states, at least in the beginning, I needed to set aside a couple of hours to really get into those deep levels to clear up my mind. Nowadays, I can get into it a lot quicker, But when I was just starting out, I needed to set aside a couple of hours to really get into those deep levels of meditating where my mind was that clear. Once you're able to reach those states and you can identify and remember what those states felt like, then it becomes easier to get to them quicker the next time. And so you might spend 2 hours on it one day. You might spend an hour and 55 minutes the next day. You might be able to reduce it by 5 minutes a day. And maybe again, life is cycles. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more difficult. So one day you might be able to get there in an hour. The next day it takes 2 hours again. But then sometime later on, you're able to get there in a half an hour. The more you practice it, it's like anything else. The more you practice it, the better you get. And by making meditation a daily practice, where you're doing it as often as you can, and you're really dedicating a period of time just to allow your mind to relax, let go, and focus, your mind will become stronger. It's like lifting weights. You set aside an hour to lift weights every day, or just do push-ups or any other kind of exercise. You just set aside the time to do it. Some days you'll do better than other days, but eventually you get stronger and stronger and stronger. And whereas in the beginning you might only be doing 2 or 3 push-ups, give yourself a couple of months and you'll be doing 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50 push-ups at a time when you started out only doing 2 or 3. With willpower. Meditation is one way to do it. There's another trick that I'm going to share, and this will really be the last thing that I do because I realize how much time has passed here. There's a trick that I teach that anybody, literally anybody, it doesn't matter how little willpower you have. If you're the type of person that says, oh, I have absolutely no willpower, I can't do anything, you can do this. And here's the process. Anytime you're about ready to do something, whatever it is, before you do it, just simply make a decision to do it, and then follow through with whatever you were going to do. For instance, right now, my throat is feeling a little dry. I'm thinking about taking a drink. I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to take a drink, and then I'm going to follow through and do it. You can start out the day. You wake up in the morning. You're about ready to get out of bed. I'm going to decide I'm going to get out of bed, and then do it. Before you go to the bathroom, decide, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then do it. And then whatever else you're going to do during the day, I'm going to decide to get dressed. I'm going to do that. I'm going to decide to get breakfast. Do that. I'm going to decide to sit down. Do that. I'm going to decide to stand up. Whatever it is you're going to do, just make a decision before you do it, and then follow through with what you were going to do anyways. If you do this for a couple of days, and I do recommend at least 3 days on this, but I would say if you're not sure you can follow through on that for 3 days, just decide to do it for 1 day. Decide to just do it for an hour. It doesn't matter. The point is, start easy. Make a decision that you're going to at least try this process for an hour. See what you think about it, and then make a new decision whether or not you're going to continue. I recommend you do it for 3 days. If you do it for a couple of days, you will have made several hundred decisions and successfully followed through with every single one of them. You will have developed a history of success of using willpower. Because willpower, again, as we have defined it, is nothing more than making a decision and following through on that decision. And so by running a practice loop, doing this practice of willpower, just establishing a foundation of making a decision and then following through on that decision, you will have developed also a belief that I can make decisions and follow through with it. And believe it or not, willpower is also powered by belief. The more you believe you have willpower, the more willpower you have. So, the bottom line in all of this is that in order to manifest on a metaphysical level, we need to tap into the divine essence of the universe, the divine creator. We do this through many different ways. One of the ways that we do this is through the focus of our mind. Whatever we focus on, whatever we believe becomes our reality. And it is possible to simply choose to believe in something new. It takes willpower. It takes a force of mind to make that choice, to imagine yourself believing that choice, and to stand firm in that choice until it happens. It's something that anybody can do. It takes a little bit of work, but I believe in you. And I'll call it good at that point. Thank you.